Telecommunications looks a lot different today than it did long ago. Even technologies that are still present in recent memory, such as corded landline phones, are largely a thing of the past. But did you know that some of the first telecom inventions became the foundation for modern technologies we use today? Let's take a brief look through the history of telephony to see how far we've come since the very beginning. Let's start with the telegraph, a tool that let you send messages through wires using electric signals. Eventually, a few inventors set out to improve the idea of the telegraph by designing a device that would transmit voices electronically, though Alexander Graham Bell is credited as the official inventor of the telephone in 1876. Graham Bell founded Bell Labs and built a telephone company that eventually spread across the country. These early innovations made it possible to place calls across short and long distances. Commercialization of the telephone and industry practices continued through the late 1800s and into the early 1900s. By the 1960s, telephones had become an essential component of life at home and work. But not like we have today. Phone companies had to physically route calls even if you were placing a call to your coworker in the next room. These calls were made possible by the Public Switch Telephone Network, or PSTN. Companies eventually started using their own switchboards and operators, giving birth to the first private branch exchange, or PBX systems. Switchboards later became automated, so there was no longer a need for a person to operate them. This evolution made PBX systems more affordable. The industry then saw the introduction of primary rate interfaces, or PRI, in the 1980s. A PRI enabled businesses to handle multiple phone connections. This technology required PBX equipment and delivered voice communication across a T1 line. For background, T1 is a communication service that used physical copper wires to enable end-to-end connections, a drastic improvement over analog single lines. PRI, or PRI Trunking, became the telecom standard for business communications because the technology could support 23 calling channels at once. As communication demands increased, telecommunications technologies also evolved. PRI connections redefined calling capabilities and were the precursor to Voice over Internet Protocol, or VoIP, and SIP trunking. But we'll get to that. Fast forward to the late 1980s and 1990s, which gave rise to the Internet. The invention and broader use of the Internet changed telephony forever. Experts combined Internet Protocol, IP, and PBX systems, and evolved PRI connections to create a new wave of communications known as VoIP. VoIP technologies have shaped unified communications and how modern businesses interact. With VoIP, experts were able to connect virtual call channels with the PBX. This gave rise to SIP trunking, the evolution of PRI and virtual version of analog lines. With telephony leveraging the Internet, a new host of tools and capabilities were possible. PBX systems became hosted virtually, and calling and faxing were increasingly handled over the Internet. That brings us to today, where modern carriers such as Flowroute have evolved the foundations of telephony to enable high-quality calling services possible for businesses worldwide. Many of today's communication technologies do not require traditional equipment to ensure quality connections. Instead, businesses can implement SIP trunking by using their existing Internet connection to make inbound and outbound calls without a telephone line. Growing cloud adoption and the rollout of modern telecommunications tools continue to drive the evolution of telephony. Flowroute solutions help shape this change, providing businesses with the communication tools they need to be successful. Contact us today to enable modern telephony for your business.